by their consent of being something or claiming to be who and what they are not. The other problem that you have is people have confused their organizations, their clubs, their little prayer institutions, and have contaminated themselves spiritually by equating the little social solace systems that men have created, confusing them with your pedigree or your bloodline, your birthright, divine crystal stream that runs from your heart through your body, given to you by your mother, which is your nationality, which stands supreme and is not to be equated with the clubs that you may belong to, whether you call them Muslim, Christian, Jew, or whatever tag that you put on them, has nothing at all or whatsoever to do with divine operations from the source of creation, etc., which is not to be contaminated. So therefore, your concept of operations, your concept of thinking are to be contrary to anything that corrupts the blood. So there shall be no corruption of blood. And also look at that as a phrase, corruption of blood. And then look that up, because that's another subject matter in its own right. And so this instrument is also a countermeasure to corruption of blood. The straw man operations is designed for corruption of blood. The different pharmaceutical operations established by the hybrid Europeans to inject into the bloodstreams of the people is a corruption of blood and an indirect attempt to distort and to remove you from descendability by virtue of putting a patent on your actual physical blood by virtue of injecting you with patented instrumentality of things that they have called many names that are alleging to make your life better, but are actually designed to steal your birthright. And that is not discussed. And also, if you go in that area, they will block that information because they really still, on multiple levels, do not want the people to recognize that when they interject foreign substance within your bloodstream by any format, they're also in the background creating bonds against it and on patents and claiming under the unum sanctum, the dum diversus, and the inter caetera divina operations of the popes of Rome via the Jesuit order, etc., and with their military operations known as the United States Corporation that has been fostered onto the planet under the guise of a nation, which it is not, was not, never will be, and has been fraudulently operating, going to and fro the earth, devouring nations. And finally, we have what you would call the gift from our ancestors of people beginning to wake up and to reject these people and their order of false constructs, and whether they are Asiatic or hybrid Europeans around the planet, they are arising and starting to reject the fraud, the impostorship, the occupation, the de facto operations of the Jesuit order, and the club members of the Crown of the Circle Church and Chancery operating from Fleet Street, England, operating the judicial systems in violation of treaty and constitution that has been creating, managing, and profiting from the wars in most of your modern and contemporary times have been actually initiated by, funded by, managed by, and profiting to members of the Circle Church and Chancery, who are also members of the Roman Curia. So in the nature of this bill of particulars, you're talking to all of them. However, in a more direct, you're talking to a person who may claim to be the tax collector for the city of Pensalkin to you, and you owe us a water tax, and you owe us a property tax, and we're going to put a lien on you if you don't respond positively to this corporate operation. Excuse the fire engines in the background. Background noise. And many of our people, not being aware of what that really is, have been submitting to it for a few generations, and logically the children have learned from their parents, not knowing that their parents didn't know better. And so when the communities of the people have been suffering politically, economically, and socially, they've been falsely trained under animal husbandry to use the misstatement called racism and prejudice as a diversion of what's really going on, when the problem was and is to this very day birthright theft and cheating operations by members of the Roman Curia, disguised and impersonating themselves as U.S. government officials, and states of New Jersey, states of Pennsylvania, states of Delaware, municipal pseudo officers, who all of which have not been constitutionally sanctioned, nor can they present to you a quo warranto proving their authority. So the bill of particulars will in its nature also be a quo warranto. So back to point. That's why I say we can't read it all, but so that you can understand the nature and comprehend the nature of the bill of particulars, I ran off some of those things to correct the concepts that you may have already, or that you may develop when you hear this. But this is the state of mind that you're to be in. So, so the jurisdiction is i.e. private, commercial, residential status. And that's the status that they have put the people in. And when they're taxing, as an example, people's homes, and the people have not been aware of those different statuses. So when they're doing what is known as taxation, so write this down and get very grounded in all of these areas, because this is where your taxation issues will arise. One will be private, one will be commercial, one will be residential. Study each one of them and be clear on what does not apply to you. In fact, distinguish from what they have said applies to you, and you did not counter it, or you did not know the difference. One, I, and then you put your appellation. Further demand verifiable copies of any quote unquote original contracts and or copies of any quote unquote endorsed consensual agreements quote unquote that gave rise to and are known or willing authorization or consent to the current classification status of the said estate private property geographically located at or near, and then you have there the number of that's placed on it, the property, politically placed upon the property, known commonly referred to as an address. And keep in mind, the address does not actually apply to the property. The address that's given to a location is actually a private foreign tax assessment classification designation. As an example, when people would say to you, "What is your address?" know that any address never belongs to you. So you don't have an address. An address is a tax assessment number that is politically given fraudulently to private property in order to misclassify it to tax it. And this was accelerated particularly since the Delano Roosevelt administration in the 30s, although it was also initiated earlier. Those of you who have your libraries intact, do a little research on taxation, do a little research on aboriginal titles distinguished from mortgages and deeds, and allodial titles distinguished from mortgages and deeds, and timelines, particularly relative to 1913, when Woodrow Wilson met with the bankers and the members of the Circle Church and Chancery at Jekyll Island off the coast of geographical Georgia, located at North America. Now, so I demand verifiable copies of these instrumentalities when they're making a claim, right? And so you want to have copies of all original contracts, all authorization or consent forms, and if it does not contain on any of those instrumentalities your appellation or autograph or what they refer to as signature, understand the claim that they make is not valid and is in fact a fraud. An assumption of consent is not sufficient in law. However, most people never challenge and therefore deny their own standing at law in relationship to their estate, not being aware that the estate is theirs and not the property of the corporate state of New Jersey, nor of the corporate agencies and corporate owners of Pennsauken, New Jersey, or any other municipality and its operatives who have been taxing the people's private property and have built their private wealth upon that for generations. Logically, not morally, not ethically, but logically, such persons and such beings do not want this information being shared with you, but you already know how we've been rolling with the Order of the Round Table and also at the House of Reawakening Minds, because this is goes into the reality of the politics, and of course it takes the people, it challenges their third dimensional thinking that they've been trained in under the animal husbandry operations of the General Education Board of 1902 that has been operating pretty powerfully, not just here, but around the world, and has caused much damage against the human family. And by many of the people not being aware of it, they take offense at the truth instead of offense at the false information that they've been trained in for generations. So now, number two, in your command in this Bill of Particulars, and it's also in the nature of discovery what it is. Two, as the Township of Pennsauken Incorporated Tax Commissioner, Tax Collector, Tax Assessor, and Township of Pennsauken Corporation Attorney, did you know that New Jersey State Republic is distinguished from the State of New Jersey Incorporated, 1844, and that the State of New Jersey is a private corporation foreign to the Constitution for the United States, States United, and that no corporate entity which does not have an existing valid taxation law sanctioned by a de jure constitutional Congress for the United States, which by quo warranto via Article 3 only grants the power or the lawful authorization for any constitutional officer or person to collect or lay an excise tax on property. Answer yes or no. Keep this in mind when you're sending this out, that they can't ever lawfully say they don't know, because they do know. And if they didn't know, they had no business holding that office. And keep in mind, under law, that any contractor or employee or officer of any state, etc., or municipality, or any governmental position at all that puts any tax burden or claim of authority on the nationals or the citizens can never, by law, by any process, claim that they did not know the law. Color of law excuses are void at law, in law, at every junction or claim. They can never be rebutted. In other words, no person or entity, operative or contractor that say they didn't know the law is ever excused. However, they've been saying that to you. And the real deal is that applies to them. And they've been screwing you, robbing you, getting wealthy off of you, and actually vesting in instrumentality and organizations and corporate constructs that actually further have injured the people. Back to the quo warranto. If there is, pardon me, I apologize. This is number 3. If there's any objections to the above facts, then please provide the substantive evidence to prove, and this is your request to such persons who keep claiming to be government. Keep this in mind. This thing is freezing up on me, I think. This is so funny. Whenever I get start getting into really information that really helps the people, they start messing with. This is why another reason why I don't use the maps. They start messing with it.
They're starting with this 4th of July stuff already.
Yes. If there's any objections or are any objections to the above stated facts, then please provide substantive evidence to prove the above facts to be in error, to be false, to be incorrect, or to be untrue. I demand that you provide the constitutional laws, constitutional acts of state, congressional acts, de jure legislation, or provisionaries that grants the authorization of the state of New Jersey or the township of Pennsauken assessor, division of taxation, division of revenue collection, etc., to exercise such authorities. And you can see why they're getting upset already. And what's happening also as I'm talking to you is that it's actually, every time I move the cursor, it's skipping and it's jumping. Didn't do that downstairs. It didn't do that before, but you already know how that rolls, and you know what's going on right now. But conceptually, so the Bill of Attainders is in itself a construct of a quo warranto, because you're commanding of them the evidence, the discovery, and the quo warranto nature of their claim. In doing so, particularly when you do it officially on paper, and particularly if you're flying your colors, that means your national flag, etc., now it becomes an international issue, which it always is anyway. And of course, fundamentally, if you're dealing with valid or honorable so-called leadership or so-called spiritual guys and all that stuff, they keep talking about divinity, etc., it is their position to challenge, and is their position to then, what you would call, switch their ministerial hats into their consular position and counter the claim of the foreign state intruding on the jurisdictional territories of the nationals or the citizens of another state. It's called acts of state. Write that down so you will comprehend acts of state, quote unquote acts of state. That's you must. These things that I'm mentioning to you are necessary in your basic comprehension or your basic knowledge areas, so that the concept of the Bill of Particulars or a mandamus or an agreement of jurisdiction, etc., can be comprehended why it is done, and your obligation to yourself as to why it is done, and the fact that you do it, and the other fact that you never neglect doing it, and also why these fundamentals and expand it, because this is very simple, basically what we're talking about right now. But the nature of this conversation should be common in our communities. You should not be wasting your time marching and praying and sitting around talking about racism, which is all total diversion and mind control systems. That's not to condemn people who have good intentions. However, good intentions does not make a good surgeon. So get away with the dirty butter knives. And the same thing with operations in government, etc. So again, quo wancho. Now I'm going to, because it keeps skipping, so I'm going to deal with what's there. So as they interrupt, nature, divine nature, will come in and rescue. Anyway, 9. Since the Congress for the United States are the only lawful legislative body that has delegated authority to lay and collect taxes, then who and what entity authorized the Township of Pennsauken Incorporated Board of Taxation, Tax Collectors, and Tax Commissioner, and the State of New Jersey Incorporated and or its employees to lay and collect property taxes? Answer it, and you have a space for them to answer, because they go like they send stuff to you. Oh, this is a summons to come to. You're going to be a juror. Like they send you stuff. You're supposed to be sending them stuff, but you're going to do it competently. And so these things, Bill of Particulars, and also discovery and quo are the nature of your instruction as being nationals of the land, and those